Hey guys, welcome to another great edition of Virtual Combined Sunday School. I am so glad that you guys are here today as we take a look at the series that we are continuing in evangelism called In Depth. If you haven't been joining us, this is your first week here. I encourage you to go back to the last 2 weeks that should be in the Sunday School playlist on our YouTube channel. But go ahead and take a look at those before you come to this one. Although this one is going, they're all separate, it's good to have all the content at once so that you can prepare yourself for what we are going to talk about today. We're going to find ourselves in Acts chapter 17, and we're going to talk about Paul on Mars Hill today. But before we get into the text, I want to start us off on our discussion question, just something to kind of wet the whistle a little bit, to get us started thinking about these themes and images that Paul is going to be introducing us to in this text. And here's the question. How do you respectfully disagree with someone that has a different religious faith than you? How do you respectfully disagree with somebody who has a different religious belief than you? Oftentimes we meet people from various faith backgrounds and various religions and a lot of different ideas about who Jesus is or why he came or if he really came at all. I think it helps us to know how we respond to them and what ways can we be respectful in our response. So go ahead, take just a few minutes, hear from everybody on how you can respectfully disagree with somebody that you differ with spiritually and theologically. And then come on back and we'll be waiting here for you and we'll get right into our text of Acts 17. Hey guys, welcome back. In order for us to get the entirety of this text, what I want to do, since this is a narrative, is to read the entire narrative for us right now, and then come back and take a look at the things that struck me on evangelism throughout the text. All right, so let's start in verse 22. Actually, some context here. Paul was interrupting a group of philosophers as they were talking around Mars Hill and debating with them. And he starts then in verse 22, a defense as to why he believes what he believes. And it does a great job of it. Take a look with me in verse 22 as we start this narrative. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far away from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. And when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. All right, now there's just a couple of things here that I see that I want to hit on when it comes to Paul's evangelism style and technique. Look, there's a ton of theology here, a lot of great deep theology here that we're not going to get into today, all right? But what we want to look at is how Paul approached these men and how he evangelized to these men. Now, this goes without saying in the text, at least in this text. It was talked about before this text, so we want to talk about context. Paul was invited to speak. He didn't demand an audience. He didn't interject himself. He didn't rudely interrupt himself. He simply was invited, and he took advantage of the opportunity. I think a lot of times we try to interject our faith and our viewpoints on people who really don't want us to interject. Now, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be times where we lovingly correct someone or ask someone to be respectful of our views or our beliefs or our opinions. But when we're talking about someone else's faith, we have to be invited in. It's not just something we can demand. So my first rule here, taken by Paul, is wait until you are invited, but also find a way to be invited, right? So, all right, so the first thing I noticed in the text that we actually read starts in verse 22. His very first words to them were, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." Paul, right off the bat, does not disrespect the people that he's evangelizing to. He does, even though he disagrees with them, he doesn't call what they're doing stupid. He doesn't make fun of them. He doesn't invalidate them. He simply acknowledges the good out of it. Not the good theology out of it, because there isn't any, but the mere fact that these are people who are seeking religious things. Paul is acknowledging the good. And that's where I want you to just take a minute and ask this question. How can you find the good in people that you disagree with? How can you find the good in an atheist, an agnostic, a Muslim? How can you find the good in a liberal or a conservative? How can you find the good in those that you disagree with in order that you can help them see the goodness of God? Take a couple minutes, answer that question, and I'll be waiting here for you when you get back. All right. I hope you had a great discussion. I hope you were able to talk about bringing out the good, seeing the good in people, regardless of how they view God or view politics or view whatever. When we disagree with somebody, it is so crucial that we find good in what they're doing so we can bring that out and show it to them, so that they can see our love and care for them, okay? But we're going to keep on going, because right there in the next verse, Acts 17:23, after Paul gracefully, I should say, brings up the unknown God, which, by the way, if we are going to evangelize to somebody who believes different than us, it would pay us to listen to their beliefs so that we can pick out these things where I say, man, you almost have it, but let me show you Jesus, right? So that we can point them to Christ instead of the false doctrine or God that they believe in. But right after he brings this up, he says this to them. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. Notice while Paul is not being disrespectful, he's also not backing away. All right, that word ignorant doesn't mean stupid. I want to make sure we're clear here. Paul is not calling them a name. He's not mocking them. What he is saying is that they are simply ignorant. They don't understand. They don't know what they don't know yet. And so Paul, while he points out the wrong in their theology, gives them a correct theology. So not only does he say, you're wrong, he says, let me tell you why you're wrong. Man, that is crucial. You can't just look at somebody in their faith and say, I disagree with you. You have to be able to say why. This is something I teach my kids all the time. They disagree with me a lot, as you would imagine. Kids often do, right? But when my older kids come to me and they say, I don't think that's right, or I don't agree with you, or that's not fair, my first question to them is why. And when they answer the why, my next question to them is, well, what evidence do you have to back that up? That one always throws them because they hardly ever have any evidence. They're just going off of emotion. They're going off of feeling because they're kids. That's what kids do. Adults are different. We have the capabilities to deeply think and consider and maturely judge our thoughts and beliefs. And so when we hear something that we disagree with, we have to be able to say, number one, why? And number two, we have to be able to back it up. What articles can I point them to? What scriptures can I share with them? What theology can I prove to them logically to support what I am saying to them? We believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, who died on the cross and resurrected from the grave. But can you show them where that is? And can you defend that logically? Because if you can't, you need to take the time to open the scripture, to read some books on apologetics, right? The defense of our faith, and educate yourself on the things that you believe. So what I want you to do right now is to ask yourself this question, and to pause and do your next discussion question. How well am I able to back up what I believe? Could I hold my own in a debate to the point where I can say what is wrong and back it up with a text, with a scripture, an article, or logical thinking? Take some time to answer that question. Really think hard about this one. And when you come back, we'll talk about how Paul introduces the gospel to these men. All right, well, I hope you had a really good conversation. It turns out in between the breaks, a friend of mine was out in the hallway and we ended up talking. And I want to bring up a point that was brought up in that conversation, and that's it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say that at the moment. But what you have to say after that matters. If you say, I don't know, and you never look into it, then you're not going to answer that question for them, and they may not even look to you for questions anymore. What you have to be able to say, at least what I would recommend you saying, is, I don't know the answer to that question, but how about we look at it together, and when we come back next time, we'll discuss what we both have found. By doing that, not only are you telling them that you care enough about them to seek out an answer, but you're also opening the door for a second conversation. And what better way to get the gospel ingrained in somebody's heart than by multiple conversations about the topic? All right? So just a piece of advice there, and I hope the rest of your discussion was great, and I hope you were able to talk about how you can back up your theology and the things that you would disagree with somebody from a different faith. But what I want to talk about now is how Paul introduced the gospel and what we can learn from that. And specifically, I want to take a look at verse 27. Paul says to the Athenians, he says, God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. Okay, now what he's referring to is found in verse 26. He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. In other words, God placed them right where he wanted them to be so that they would be the most inclined to seek him out so that they can find him even though he's not that far away. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, the thing that I think we have to do in our evangelism is point out that the person that we are talking to was specifically put in this context, in this location, in this world, at this specific time, so that they could find the answers they're looking for in God. And if they just look hard enough, or if they open their eyes in a certain way, they'll find that he has been there the entire time. This is a good time for you to bring in a personal story. I mean, think about it. How many times after the fact did you look back at a situation and say, man, if I just recognized God's movement in my life, he was there the entire time and I didn't see him. I think about the things that I've been through, all the negative things, all the stress in my life, all the dysfunction, all the pain, all the whatever. And I look back at those moments and I say, man, God was there the entire time because he led me to the couple who, he led me to my brother who led me to Christ. He led me to the couple who took me in at 18 and mentored me in my faith. He led me to the army. He led me to the churches that I was at until I came here to this moment so that I could grow and be healed and learn from the many people that I've interacted with in my time here at Cornerstone. I mean, that's God's hand guiding me when I never thought or I didn't think he ever would. We have to be able to look at the person across the table from us or at the coffee shop with us or wherever they might be and say, God put you here for a reason so that perhaps, as Paul says, you might reach out to him because he's not far. But look what Paul does then in verse 28. He says, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Now, Paul does something really good here. He takes a source that they would know, and he brings it to Christ. He makes it about Jesus. He puts his theology into it. If you aren't paying attention to the things that your friends care about, you need to start doing that because you can take what they love, whether it be a hobby, a political view, a philosophy, a favorite brand of drink, whatever it might be. You can take whatever it is that a person does, and you can make it about Jesus. And I want to prove this to you, but I can't do this over camera. So what I'm going to say is, for those who actually know me and who see me physically, what I want you to do is the next time you see me, I want you to come up to me and give me a topic, a hobby, an idea, or something, and I will see if I can't make an illustration out of it. I bet you I can. But even if I can't, I know that our children's minister, Ben Radon, is amazing at this, and you need to ask him to do that too because the man is awesome at it. So go ahead and ask him about that. But you have to be able to use pop culture and use it for the sake of God. I mean, there's stories all the time about what God is doing in sports or what God has been doing in our culture or in a person's life. You can take those stories and say, here's Jesus. Here's how Jesus fits into our culture. That's what connects with people. And when you connect God to the things that people care about, then it's not going to take much for them to start caring about God. Paul says in verse 29, therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone or an image made by human design and skill. So now Paul takes that illustration and he shows them how that logically does not make sense with their actions. And before we get to someone's heart, I believe we have to get to someone's mind. And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes before we get to their mind, we have to get to their heart. But on a majority scale, especially in the culture that I live in right here in Indianapolis, it's more about the logic than it is about the emotion. And what I want to stress to you is that you have to be able to make your arguments logical, your illustrations logical, so that they see not only that you care, but that you're thoughtful, that you know what you believe, so that they know that you are talking as one with authority. And when you do that, then you can lovingly guide them to the truth of Christ's gospel. Paul does this in verses 31 and 32. He says, Jesus has given proof of this to everyone, or God has given proof of this to everyone by raising Jesus from the dead. Now, Paul saves the controversial stuff for the end. You notice right after this, there were people who sneered at him and said he's out of his mind. But then there are others who said, well, I want to hear more. But he waited till the end because he knew that when he brought that up, conversation over, people were either going to reject it or want to think about it. So he saved it for last. You don't jump into a conversation telling them about the choice that they have to make about Jesus, or the truth that Jesus is God and that Jesus died on the cross and that he resurrected from the grave. You don't start there. You lead people there. Even Jesus walked to the cross, right? We have to walk others there as well. And we do that by cautiously or boldly, I don't know. Those are two different words, but they kind of do the same thing. By lovingly, maybe that's the better word, lovingly leading people through a connection, respecting their beliefs, lovingly disagreeing with them, calling out what's wrong and backing that up, but then sharing the truth of God. That's where it has to end. Because if you don't, then you just had a good conversation. And let me tell you, there's a whole difference between a good conversation and a conversation that leads to Christ. You need to have more than just good conversations. And don't believe the lie that, oh, I'll just get it next time. Because you know what? There may not be a next time. Think about this. In March, we were all ready to have continued conversations, cookouts, spring break, Easter, all these different things that we were excited about gathering around family. And just like that, the entire community was shut down. We didn't see friends. We didn't see family. We didn't see anybody. We didn't venture outside our homes. Now imagine that you had a conversation with somebody and you said to yourself, well, the next time I'm going to get them. The next time I'll bring it up. And then COVID hits and isolation hits and you never have that conversation again. You don't want to live with that kind of guilt. You have to take advantage of the opportunity that you have been given. And if they're not ready to hear it, then they're not ready to hear it. But at least you tried. At least you tried. And as I always say, God never condemns a heart that tries. Look, I'm not here to say that your salvation will be on the line if you don't share the gospel with Christ. But let me tell you, their salvation will be. You could be the one that leads a person to Christ. All you have to do is start a conversation. Connect with them. Respect them. And then lead them to Christ. That's it. I hope that you practice this, and like I said a couple of weeks ago, I want you to keep praying for that one person that you want to lead to Christ. But now I want you to reach out to that person and ask them if they would consider having a meal with you, coffee, whatever it might be. And start engaging them in that conversation that will lead to sharing the gospel. When you do that, I want you to share with me how it went. You can email me at larrydvinson@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook if that's what you would rather do. Or you can contact our church for any questions that you have, or any staff member would love to talk to you about the gospel of Christ. All you have to do is find us on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/CCC Brownsburg. That's also our Instagram handle as well. You can find us on the web at cornerstonerock.org. Wow, I had a brain fart there. cornerstonerock.org. Or you can find us on YouTube for more video, more content. Cornerstone Church Brownsburg. You can find a whole bunch of stuff there. We have sermons, Sunday school lessons for both adults, teens, and kids. We also have some worship playlists for you as well. Guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope this works out for you, and I hope that the person you reach out to comes to Christ and accepts him as their Lord and Savior. Have a great week. Peace, love, and soul.